Hello and welcome to the presentation on the Performance Parking Pilot Project for Commercial Corridors. This project has been planned and is being implemented by the Parking and Curb Space Management team of the Transportation Engineering and Operations Bureau, which is part of Arlington County's Department of Environmental Services. The 3-year pilot project aims to improve the user experience for metered parking spaces in 2 key commercial residential corridors in Arlington: the Roslyn-Ballston corridor and the Richmond Highway corridor. This presentation will give you some insight into 5 topics. First, we will give an overview of the pilot project, answering questions such as what defines a pilot, why are we trying out performance parking, and what approach are we using. Next, we will give a quick update on where we are with the sensor installation for the project, followed by some detail on what kind of data we are gathering from the sensors. Then you will also receive some insight into what we have heard so far from the community and stakeholders and the next steps as we are transitioning into the parking demand management of the project. We will now begin with the project overview. This is a pilot project, meaning it will be evaluated to measure effectiveness. And so during this time-limited project, which is 3 years, and we are now about to enter into the 2nd year, we are testing, in our case, a performance parking system. And based on what we find, it may or may not become a permanent part of our curb space management plans. This project tests one approach for using data and pricing information to manage demand. And the data we are gathering before, during, and after the implementation will assist us in determining the system's effectiveness. So why are we implementing this pilot? We as staff are guided by the Master Transportation Plan, and policy number 5 of the parking and curb space element of this plan specifies that we should utilize parking meter pricing strategies that vary by hour and location to better match parking availability and demand. And the purpose is to make metered parking spaces more available, more often, and we should do so by sharing useful information about parking options in real time, which ultimately reduce the negative impacts associated with the search for metered parking. As you may be aware, we currently have a fixed price for all metered spaces, which is mostly $1.75, with a few exceptions in long-term metered spaces, where the price is $1.50, and those prices are currently completely independent of the demand on those spaces, and have as such no significant influence on shifting parking behavior. You have heard the term performance parking now a few times. What does it actually mean? It entails 4 different aspects. It's data-driven, actively managed, tailored, and flexible and responsive. What we mean when we say data-driven is that we use the data we gather from installed sensors to analyze how occupied parking spaces are. And with this information, we can start to actively manage the demand on parking spaces by using, for example, different pricing strategies. And those strategies can be tailored to the specific area and neighborhood, and we are able to flexibly and responsively react to shifts in demand and changing parking behavior to serve the needs of the community. We of course defined project goals for this pilot, and one of the main goals is to make it easier than it is today to find parking on block faces with high demand. In addition, we also hope to see that more people choose to park on block faces where demand is low today, mainly by utilizing parking occupancy information that will be made available through various tools, and this should then lead to drivers spending less time looking for on-street parking in the first place. Drivers should also perceive that they spend less time looking for on-street parking. It will be of not much use if the data tells us parking is available, but the public has a different experience on the street. And with improved parking availability at a given block, we would like to also see fewer instances of double parking, thus freeing up travel lanes, reducing conflicts, and improving safety. And finally, vehicle miles traveled resulting from on-street parking search or cruising should be reduced in these areas with the system, and we should see a reduction of mobile emissions due to less cruising and idling. We would also like to talk about things that this project is not doing. This pilot does not seek to increase parking meter revenue, and as such will not increase all metered parking rates across the board. We are focused on managing demand, which will likely entail raising parking fees in high demand areas, while lowering rates in the low demand ones. We are also not seeking to increase or decrease the number of ADA accessible spaces as part of this pilot. In fact, this project does not include the changes of any type of curbside use, such as loading, pickup drop-off spaces, or the like. These changes are occurring on a regular basis as part of the operational work of the department, but are not part of this pilot. We are also not creating a dynamically or fast-changing metered pricing. You might be familiar with the regional express lanes or ride-hailing company surge pricing. But our project will not implement this type of pricing changes. We seek to make some changes and keep them in place for about 3 to 4 months to be able to analyze them and then make recommendations which will be implemented in another round of changes. So it will be much more predictable and user-friendly. And finally, we are also not changing the payment methods. Everything you use today will still exist going forward. The approach for this pilot will be cyclical, including in each cycle the gathering and analysis of data, both from parking sensors as well as feedback from the public, and incorporating the goals and priorities for this pilot into the recommendation we will use to implement the next round of changes. Each cycle is about 3 to 4 months, which should give us about 7 to 8 rate changes and analysis cycles, and during each one, we will continue public outreach. We share what we have learned and communicate on the changes that can be expected in the next cycle. This brings us now to the sensor installation update. During the first year of this project, we have focused on the installation of the parking sensors. You may have noticed the installation team drilling a hole into the ground of the metered spaces. Each hole is about 6 inches below ground level. They then placed a sensor into the hole and filled it with epoxy. All spaces were also delineated to mark each space to ensure vehicles are parked over the sensor. These sensors only detect the presence of a vehicle. They do not collect any personal information. They are battery operated and low power. The life expectancy is about 10 years and they're completely wireless. You can see here in the imagery below that image with the installation crew. On the left side there is the sensor, and on the right side it's the gateway which has been installed on traffic lights to communicate the sensor information to the cloud so we can access it and analyze it. By now, we have installed about 4,181 sensors at approximately 444 street blocks, and in the image here you can see what a finalized sensor installation looks like. It's pretty much just a hole in the ground that has been filled with epoxy, so you really have to look out for those to even notice. And you wouldn't be able to see it as soon as a car has been parked. We have worked very closely with the sensor installation team to accommodate any needs and quickly address delays in the sensor installation. We have developed primary points of contact for sensor installations with the county's permitting staff to make it easier for the installation team to coordinate around other activities in the right-of-way. And we also established regular communication channels between the Department of Environmental Services and Police, specifically the PSAs, and the installation team to share information and coordinate activities. We also had a few contingency plans in place in case of unforeseen challenges or delays, such as weather-related events. So what data are we getting from the sensors, and what are we learning from it? As the main variable of this project, we are looking at occupancy. Occupancy is the amount of parking that occurs in a certain area. And so we see variations, but also trends in the data. And this slide shows you the variations. We can see differences throughout various categories. We see differences based on hour and block phase, what day of the week it is, or in what neighborhood the parking occurs. The maps on this slide now are an example of Virginia Square. These are only the blocks where the meters as well as the sensors have been installed. From the color scheme, you can see that the red blocks show areas with greater than 80% occupancy. That means that most of the spaces have been taken. The gray blocks are the ones in between, so it would be about 40 to 80% occupied. And any blue blocks are below 40% parked. In the map on the top, it shows that the demand overall seems to be much lower at a certain time. And then the lower map shows a higher demand scenario. And these differences we need to take into consideration when we are making our pricing recommendations. However, it would be very difficult for a driver to have to figure out or react to pricing recommendations that would be adjusted based on all these variations we just saw. And that's why we're also looking at occupancy trends. For example, are there lunchtime peaks, as you can see on the left side in the graphs on the top? Or are there evening peaks, as the graphs on the bottom show? These are two neighborhoods in Arlington County that show a very high demand in the evening, which are Clarendon and Ballston. And then in the map, you can see that there are also aerial patterns within a neighborhood. So this would be, for example, Pentagon City, and there are some areas and certain times that show a similar pattern. Even the gray blocks, they might not be falling under the above 80% category, but they're very close to it. We need to consider all these patterns to make it easier for drivers to understand when we make the pricing recommendations that a certain area will fall under that same category, and it won't shift from block to block or hour to hour. It should be as user-friendly as possible, and we will try different strategies and figure out how it works best based on the data we are gathering, as well as your feedback, which you can provide throughout the process. Here you can see now two options of tools that will be available when pricing changes occur. In the left image, you see ExactNav, which is an app that uses an icon-based visualization approach that can be zoomed in to the space level. And on the right side is CurbIQ, which is a dashboard view you can access through our project webpage. And this one uses a block phase visualization of occupancy. In addition, we will provide a public API for any third-party stakeholder to use for other data applications that we may not even think of yet. These tools will help to meet the goal of providing to the public more and better information about on-street parking, but also to help people find available parking, shift high demand to lower demand areas, and address negative impacts that come from cruising for parking. So with everything we are learning from this pilot project, how are we measuring success? As our project has been funded by the state of Virginia, the Virginia Department of Transportation has contracted an independent company to evaluate the success of this project. And so in addition to the data analysis that we are undertaking as part of the pricing change analysis and implementation cycle, Kimley Horn will conduct an even more in-depth analysis of the system optimization progress, including evaluations of traffic volumes, travel circuity, double parking, safety impacts, and the public perception and decision-making processes with regard to the project goals. We have illustrated the planning and technological aspects of the project and are now shifting the focus to what we have heard so far from the community and other stakeholders. For the initial phase of the project, we focused outreach on information about the overall project, the sensor installations, and potential impacts to the availability of spaces. But we also received initial insights into how the community prioritizes the project goals. On this slide, you can see a list of outreach activities we have done. We have launched a project website, which also includes a frequently asked question page that you might find helpful if you are looking for more detail. We hosted and posted a virtual community meeting and attended 12 external meetings from various stakeholder groups in the county. We had an online feedback form and engaged with the community at 4 pop-up events. And we had a field team do a door-to-door outreach during which they contacted over 260 businesses and apartment buildings. And they also attached about 600 decals to multi-space meters. Those decals had a QR code which sent users to our webpage and the online feedback form. The two main activities that targeted the outreach goal of prioritizing the overall project goals were the online feedback form and the pop-up events. We got a good mix of people participating. At the pop-up events, we had about 100 people doing a sticker activity to weigh the project goals, and 135 people used the online feedback form, of which about 85% were county residents. Most stated that they do use a vehicle, but also walk to various places in the county. About 16% of respondents reported having a disability that impacts their mobility. There was a lot of interest in the project, with the general agreement that parking can be difficult in the project area, but also general excitement and support for the undertaking. Questions, comments, and concerns were varied, with each outreach activity drawing different responses. When we look at the priorities people place among the project goals, we can see that the priority of desire to spend less time looking for parking ranks among the first 3 top priorities in both activities. However, pop-up events participants also prioritized reducing mobile emissions and reducing double parking, while feedback form respondents favored more confidence that I will find parking in the first place I look, and easier to find metered parking where it is hard to find today. A potential reason for this difference may be the difference between the type of people participating in each activity. While people we interacted with at pop-up events were randomly engaged into the activity, online form participants actively chose to complete the form. We do want to point out that among the 16% of respondents reporting having a disability that impacts their mobility, less double parking and less time looking for parking were highly valued. In addition, though, they more highly favored people shifting to less well-used blocks than other respondents. There was also a greater desire for enforcement and shared concern about price increases. A key takeaway then for us to consider moving forward in this project is that there is a general curiosity about making parking better. There is broad-based and robust interest in the project and its potential to make the parking experience easier and better. There is excitement about trying something new and leveraging Commonwealth resources to do so. Key will also be the ongoing education about the pilot. There were plenty of misconceptions of what the project could or would do, some of which were quickly corrected by discussions with staff. Continued outreach and clear messaging will be important to reduce confusion and worry about issues that are either not a part of the project design or which have been actively addressed through the project design. Another takeaway is that curbside uses have expanded. Many identified the need for more pickup drop-off areas for a range of needs, including ride-sharing, food pickup, and other quick parking needs. Several commenters said that these needs often lead to double parking and parking in bicycle lanes. While PUDO management is not specifically a part of this effort, these needs will be considered when reviewing sensor data and considering pricing changes. Duration of stay is one metric that the system will allow staff to observe and respond to these issues. And we are now coming to the end of this presentation by talking about the next steps. As we are entering into the second phase of the project, we are entering our first cycle of review and implementation. Again, the project is iterative. We will make multiple rounds of change using observation and data analysis to fine-tune the program to achieve our stated goals. We will collect sensor data with a focus on occupancy, and we will have ongoing outreach and collect feedback from businesses, organizations, and the community throughout the pilot project to refine our approach. Based on the existing conditions data, we will be considering the first pricing changes to address project goals and priorities we've heard so far from the community. But in each cycle, we will analyze the occupancy trends and patterns to see if the shifts in parking behavior meet our project goals, such as that more spaces become available on high demand areas, people choose to park where demand is low today, and the public perceives that more information is available and they spend less time looking for parking. And then finally, based on what we have learned from the data in the community, we are making recommendations which will be implemented in the form of pricing changes. To be able to respond flexibly to the shift in parking behavior as part of each cycle, we will be requesting temporary approval from the county board to make meter rate changes administratively. We plan to seek the permission in the December-January timeframe and will share more information on the project website as we get closer to the request for advertise process. To give you an idea about the change requests you can expect, we are giving you a brief overview of the different topics that we plan to address. The first topic pertains to the applicability and a sunset clause, so all amendments will only apply to the meters in the project area, and the sunset date of December 31st, 2025 ensures that all changes to the code will run out at that point and the pilot comes to an end. We will be requesting to change the authority for changing meter rates to the county manager or designee to ensure timely implementation of pricing recommendations, which will take place no more than quarterly. We will be seeking an allowance for a threshold for various adjustments of prices to be able to respond to increases or decreases in parking demand, and a rate increase would take place with the start of the first change. However, time limits will be decoupled from meter rate changes, and so no comprehensive sign change would need to take place. And here you can see a few more topics of potential amendment requests. These focus mainly on the complexity of rates by day of the week and times of the day, as well as the geographic distribution of rates. This comes back to the patterns that we may be seeing in the parking occupancy data, meaning that the patterns may warrant different rates in the morning, evening, or day of the week. The rates may also escalate in a parking session. In this case, you would start the parking session at a certain price, and then with each additional hour, the rate might increase. Again, all these implementations would take place in a 3 to 4 month cycle. We are also recommending a maximum rate, so we have a cap on an increase, and we are currently thinking about recommending a $7 fee per hour. The price changes would depend on what type of rate shifts the demand, and rates may be adjusted up or down in whatever increment will achieve the project goal. We are thinking of starting with an increase of $1 per price change. An upcoming engagement opportunity for you will be on December 6th in the form of a public open house. We will host this event at the Navy League building, which is at 2300 Wilson Boulevard, and it is close to the Bosman building at Courthouse. We will share more information about the process for proposed pricing changes, and if you have any questions, feel free to stop by. This meeting will occur in advance of any board action, providing permission for us to make pricing changes administratively. We hope you found this presentation informative, and we are looking forward to engaging with you at one of our upcoming engagement opportunities. If you have questions, feel free to visit our website and frequently asked question page. You may also contact us via email. The contacts are on our project website, and you may either contact the project manager or our media inquiries and public engagement staff. Until then, take care.